Torontonians are not Canadians. New Yorkers are not Americans, and those who live in the larger metropolitan areas are not true citizens of the nation they are in. The difference between people attracted to the city and those who favor the country has been noted by many researchers and ordinary citizens. But the division between the urban city dweller and the rural population is becoming more pronounced. Oddly, not much attention is paid to the contrast between the politics of the city and the politics of rural persons, other than to note the distinction exists. This is unfortunate because we are getting to the point where the country votes one way and one or two cities vote the other. This would matter less if the cities had not come to dominate the democratic process. Perhaps not much is said about this dichotomy because not many people are willing to look at the issue as a cultural issue. It is one thing to recognize the city is more liberal than the countryside. But what are we to do when faced with the question of does the country or the economy matter more? Ought 95% of the nation be controlled by an urban population that exercises 15 to 25% of the vote, because it is politically concentrated? Is Canada, Toronto? Are Canadians, Torontonians, because if not, democracy is a perverse exercise of people subjugating themselves to an alien government. There are 338 ridings in Canada. 121 of these ridings are in Ontario, nearly 40 are located in and around the Greater Toronto Area, a Liberal stronghold. In other words, 1/3 of the total is in Ontario and 1/3 of these are in the Greater Metropolitan Area of Toronto. People have a perverse idea that words are just labels. If a person wishes to be a woman, it only requires they label themselves as such. If the immigration department chooses to label you as a Canadian, then you are a Canadian. Some people got to be Canadian by being born here in the political jurisdiction called Canada. But it is said everyone came from elsewhere, or their ancestors did. What is significant about being born here from ancestors who were born here, compared to trekking across the invisible line at Roxham Road? Are there qualitative differences between Canadians? Are some people more Canadian than others? The West has always fought against the idea of second-class citizens. Equality has been a concern of white persons the world over. We have a difficult time understanding this is not a universal concern. Our Christianity has given us a sense that we are all of one race, the human race, and that as created beings, we are all equal in the eyes of God. Sweden, the most equal nation on the planet as regards the sexes, has discovered men and women are not the same, even if equal. They are attracted to different kinds of employment even when able to enter any field they wish. The West claims diversity is our strength. But when people are free to settle where they want, they cohabit with people who are similar to them. There is some interracial breeding, but the couple tend to gravitate towards one culture more than the other. It is not race that is the issue, it is culture. But race is often identified with culture. A white person born and raised in China by a chintz couple will not have an affinity for white culture despite his skin color. Metropolitan centers attract a different sort of person than do rural areas. Cities tend to be cosmopolitan because they are not of the same culture as rural areas. Yet, it is often the metropolitan areas that have the most political influence, being the economic hub of most nations. The city dweller in Toronto has more in common with a city dweller in other nations than they do with their country cousins. This presents Canada with a problem. It's a problem common to all democratic countries. The urban dweller can move from city to city regardless of the country and feel kinship with the foreign city dweller. But then, rural populations also understand the affinity rural populations have with the land. This is because despite all of the variations in outward culture, there are two basic frameworks. The rural and urban lifestyles are not just about numbers of persons. They are manifestations of two distinct worldviews. Writers have always been aware there were people who gravitated towards community living. As far back as we can go, there were cities. Much has been made of the advances in technology that permitted land to be more productive. But the fact is that there were always people who moved from the city to enjoy a more rural way of life, and people born on the farm who did not rest until they found their way to the city. The two lifestyles are not interchangeable because the cultural framework is different. We also are aware that the country person tends to be more conservative. The city person generally votes liberal. The rural/urban divide has become centered on the political differences of the liberal left and the conservative right. Which is perverse, because if they are as different as they seem, what sense does it make to try and appeal to a non-existent middle? The political center is an oxymoron or enormous proportions. There is no center, there is at best a bastardized hodgepodge of mixed messaging. But this can be difficult to understand if one has lost the ability to understand the left/right divide. This rural/urban thing is a self-selection process. Remember, the elements of this divide are encapsulated in the different political leanings of left/right. People think the political divide poses a danger to the unity of the nation. They have no idea. We are not looking at political opponents dividing. We are looking at human beings dividing into two races with nothing in common but their body shape. The left is equated with socialism and liberalism, for good reason. The left favors larger governments and greater regulations. These are not haphazard or disconnected policy positions. The left has an agenda, and it requires the strong-arm tactics of autocrats. The 5 laws of man state: 1. We own only what we create. 2. We have no claim on anything created by another. 3. No one has a claim on anything created by us. 4. We are not obliged by costs created by others. 5. No one is obliged because of costs created by us. If these 5 laws are contravened, there has to be political justification and the political means to overcome the opposition. This is liberalism. Liberals create the justification as a social agenda and favor larger and stronger governments to impose the agenda on those who create the wealth. This essay will not go into all of the strategies and legal and extra-legal tactics liberals use to justify their expropriations. We only wish to draw a line between the freeloader and the civilized. The civil or civilized pay their own way, which is required if people are to be fully rewarded for what they do. The greater the expropriation, the greater the drag on development and therefore, on specialization. The only point we are making here is that the rural lifestyle is not conducive to parasitism. This is not to say all persons in the country are civilized. Indeed, it is often noted that civilization appears to be focused in metropolitan areas. But this is only because the exploitation of the innovation is more easily achieved where the population is exploitable. It's not easy to get people who are largely independent to work for long hours, making someone else rich. Irrespective of if the line between the civil and the parasite can be clearly drawn using density of population, it is the mindset that dictates the kind of environment one will be attracted to. The town used to be centers of industry. But the modern economy has favored the creation of ever larger metropolitan areas. But the energy behind this configuration is really the free rider. Witness the city being taken over by left-leaning apologists for free-riding vagabonds. Until Canadians and other citizen groups learn to defeat free riders, the greed will grow and continue to center of the city. The Bible has the solutions, it always has. But the country must stop the slide into apostasy, which is what has enabled the city to grab the reins of power.